Ladies and gentlemen, hit subscribe to this channel right now to my super chat. Thank you so very much. Politico, 8 hours ago, Trump administration weighs naval blockade to halt Cuban oil imports. It's happening, ladies and gentlemen. There was, and hit subscribe, go to H.A. Goodman's other channel right after this for the upload synopsis. There was, not long ago, a $25 million reward. Biden raises bounty for Nicolas Maduro to $25 million, New York Times. It was the Biden administration that had a reward for the arrest of Nicolas Maduro. U.S. announces $25 million reward for arrest of Venezuela's Maduro. Okay. And so that was under Biden's administration. Okay. You have now President Trump halting all oil to Cuba. So Venezuela cannot send any more shipments of oil to Cuba, which means the Cuban economy and the regime will likely fall because of what President Trump was able to do. Hit subscribe to this channel right now. This is not the Bush, Cheney, and Rumsfeld regime changes, endless wars that I've always been against. That's the link between Bernie Sanders and President Trump. If that's the link between being on the left or, left of center or a progressive or Democrat lifelong and saying, wait, Trump is a great president. He's basically a 90s Democrat. He's not going to send Americans to never-ending military conflict and regime change wars, but he's going to, through tariffs, through the arrest and then indictment and blocking oil and tariffs and a geopolitical calculus that's very different from President Obama in Libya and Bush, Cheney, and Rumsfeld and Hillary Clinton and John Kerry and Joe Biden in Iraq and Afghanistan. Really quickly, to give you some context, 50 to 60% of all the Americans who served in Iraq, who were killed or wounded in Iraq and Afghanistan were because of IED blasts. 2.5 million Americans served in Iraq and Afghanistan. God bless all the American soldiers and veterans and their families. But for anyone stating that Trump is trying to, he's a militant and he's out of control and he's trying to, this is colonialism and imperialism and regime change, it's not the same thing. Trump is remaking the map of the globe basically through tariffs and oil, or preventing oil in this case, or blocking oil. Reuters, Trump administration considers naval blockade. This is 7 hours ago. This is happening, ladies and gentlemen. And it's happening, let's listen to Marco Rubio really quickly.
I just gave you a statement a few minutes ago about, when the president speaks, you should take him seriously. So suffice it to say, Cuba is a disaster. It's run by incompetent, senile men, and in some cases, not senile, but incompetent nonetheless. It has no economy. It's in total collapse. And by the way, they were, all the guards that helped protect Maduro, this is well known, their whole spy agency, all that were full of Cubans. I mean, it's amazing. This poor island took over Venezuela in some cases. One of the biggest problems that Venezuelans have is they have to declare independence from Cuba. They tried to basically colonize it from a security standpoint. So, yeah, look, if I lived in Havana and I was in the government, I'd be concerned, at least a little bit.
Are you cutting off the oil flow to Cuba from Venezuela?
Well, the president already announced a week ago that anything that's sanctioned, it's sanctioned oil, it's not going to be allowed to get there.
Paul Bartlett, thank you so very much to my super chat. Thank you. And so it is happening, ladies and gentlemen, and it's not taking place in the manner that President Obama in Libya with a failed intervention. So you have the same people who were just fine, who voted when anyone says, oh, I critique the Democrats or I critique, no, they don't. The greatest leftists on this platform and other platforms, the pundits that make about $1 million, probably $2 million a year, you know who they are, 1 million, 4 million sub channels. They are very wealthy socialists and communists and far left. They make a ton. God bless them. They work hard. It's called capitalism, which is something they don't want in Cuba. 90% of people live in poverty. Almost 90% of people Almost 90% of the Cuban population lives in extreme poverty, according to one estimate. And the same Democrats saying, oh my God, oh, look at Trump's administration. Deportations by ICE jumped to a 10-year high in 2024. Where was Don Lemon? Nowhere to be found. He might have still been spewing propaganda on CNN. But 10-year high. Where were all the people up in arms, the good Democrats, the good morally superior liberal Democrats? Anyway, the point is, he's remaking the map of the world, ladies and gentlemen. And he's doing so without sending millions of American soldiers to face guerrilla warfare and counterinsurgency conflicts. I have written against counterinsurgency wars, endless quagmires in The Hill, the Huffington Post, Salon, other publications. Go to hagoodman.com. I have been a columnist, a journalist, and I'm a YouTuber. And if you can read my writing in a whole bunch of publications at hagoodman.com. But check this out.
Welcome back. Venezuelan opposition leader Maria Corina Machado praising President Trump for capturing Maduro, calling it a turning point. She won the and if so, how fled the Castro regime when he was just 7 years old. Republican candidate for New York State Comptroller and biotech entrepreneur Joseph Hernandez joins me now. Joseph, do you agree with the president that Cuba is about to fall on its own? And if so, how soon?
Wonderful. Thank you for having me. I absolutely agree. I think, look, Cuba has been oppressed for such a long period of time. People like us and my family, we fled communist Cuba for a better life, and we were luckily to be embraced by this amazing country. We're so indebted to this beautiful place and these beautiful people that we call Americans. And I think the timeline for Cuba is very short-lived. They can't survive without Venezuela. They used to get 100,000 barrels of oil a day that supported their economy. They were basically trading doctors and operatives for oil, and that has stopped. So I think it's just a matter of time, and we sit here as Cuban-Americans praying for that to happen quickly rather than longer.
I hate to put a number on it, but I'd like to pin you down. Are we talking weeks, months? What are we talking here, Joseph?
I mean, look, I think that you're already seeing turmoil in Cuba. It's been existent for the last couple of months. There've been energy shortages. There've been, lack of food and basic sustenance. So, look, you could only oppress the people for so long. The Cuban people have been oppressed for a very, very long period of time, and it's a matter of human rights at this point. And I think the world has to look at this and ask themselves the right questions as to whether it is right for this regime to continue to control the Cuban people. And I would argue that it's not.
Well, let's look at a picture of you while you were in Cuba as a young boy. Obviously, we hear stories, but those of us who don't live there, who haven't lived there, don't understand what it's like to live under a repressive regime. Tell us about your experience, Joseph.
Well, look, I was lucky. I was raised by great parents. My father was a political prisoner. He was thrown in prison because he didn't agree with the local politician, the local Communist Party member, and he was thrown in prison. There he got encephalitis. He was in a coma for a number of months. We ended up coming here to America and starting a life from nothing. My dad washed dishes when he came here. My mom cleaned houses, but they taught us to, work hard, get educated, and love this adopted country that gave us a chance that our own country didn't. And that's the basis by which I was raised, and that's why we, as Cuban Americans, love this country so much. We're so lucky. We're so appreciative of the opportunities we had here and the genuine love of the American people. And so we're indebted to this country.
It is a beautiful American story. As for the people that are still in Cuba, what happens? Describe the domino effect that happens now that the flow of Venezuelan oil is cut off. Work us through what the individuals, the people that live there, have to deal with now.
Well, I think, look, the lack of power, these people, they have daily shortages of energy. Just imagine your power being shut off on a continual basis for a number of days. I think that is routine. There's no food, there's no protein. These poor people can't live off protein. They don't get beef like you and I do or chicken. They have to live on very basic starch-based foods. There's continued oppression. There's, of course, dissent, and the dissents are being suppressed. You got to remember that the Cuban apparatus, the intelligence apparatus Cuba has built is so sophisticated, is very advanced. It's equivalent to things like the Mossad and the CIA. As a matter of fact, the DI, which is called the Directive of Intelligence in Cuba, was really running the intelligence community in Venezuela. They're a very sophisticated organization, and these are overzealous communists that really believe in the ideology. And, I unfortunately foresee more oppression before we see freedom, but it's not going to be a pretty timeline.
And it certainly does beg the question why the biggest city in the state that you want to represent, Joseph, here's your story. Here's the stories of the people there in Cuba and says, hey, we want socialism in that biggest city of New York City. Certainly is an odd choice. Joseph Hernandez, we appreciate your time. Thank you for sharing your story with us.
So you have communism. That was a beautiful story and beautiful, analysis of what's going on. 90% poverty. So I don't know. There's a zero rebuttal to that. Communism is evil. It doesn't work. There's never been a country that had a successful economy. It always leads to economic collapse. And you can see what President Trump is doing. Oil from Venezuela. See, Biden would never, although Biden and Democrats and never-Trumpers, they're okay with a $25 million bounty. Biden raises bounty, but this is public relations. They never really cared. Biden and the people running his administration, they never really cared about reshaping the globe, ensuring that Venezuela and Cuba are eventually wealthy countries or countries that have a democracy without never-ending wars. And I'm hoping and praying that there are no never-ending wars. I don't think there will be. I think that what President Trump is doing is what Bush, Cheney, Rumsfeld, President Obama wanted to do, but did so through endless quagmires and catastrophes on the world stage. Biden presided over an invasion in 2022. Where's the rebuttal to that? How on earth do Democrats still think that Russia is afraid of them or of Europe? And so the endless military quagmires, and like I said, President Trump is not sending 2.5 million Americans to ensure that Venezuela doesn't send oil to Cuba, or that we acquire Greenland through sending military force of 2.5 million Americans. Bush, Cheney, Rumsfeld, President Obama did. And there was a cataclysmic invasion while Biden was in office. And Trump is doing what Biden wanted, or there's a $25 million reward. And so he's already connected the dots in terms of geopolitics. Without the oil from Venezuela, Cuba cannot continue its regime economy. And God willing, will be eventually rebuilt by Cuban-Americans, by the U.S., into a country that has a democracy, has freedom, has an economy that doesn't have 90% poverty. If you're a leftist or a communist or a socialist, or you think Mamdani is fantastic in New York, does anyone know? Does anybody who voted for Mamdani know that 90% of the Cuban population lives in extreme poverty? Let's continue. By the way, to my super chat, thank you. Paul Bartlett in Australia, thank you so very much as always.
Right now, Venezuela dictator Nicolas Maduro and his wife remain in New York City prison, indicted on narco-terrorism charges.
All right, it follows a daring capture by U.S. Special Forces that was months in the making, involving CIA intel on the ground in Venezuela for months, and ultimately carried out by Delta Special Forces.
GOP Senator Rick Scott sits on the Foreign Relations and Armed Services Committee, joining us now. And Senator, it's worth noting that you have led on calls for removing Maduro for years before any other politician was really talking about it. As best I can remember, you were in Miami with Venezuelan Americans yesterday. Tell us this morning your thoughts.
Well, when I got the call yesterday morning at 4:30 in the morning from Marco Rubio, I was excited. I mean, this has been a lot of work by a lot of people to keep the issue alive and make sure everybody understands exactly who Maduro was, an evil drug trafficker that destroyed the lives of so many Venezuelans and so many Americans. So my heart goes out to everybody that's put their effort into this. I want to thank President Trump, Marco Rubio, Pete Hegseth for what an unbelievable operation this was, that had the guts to do it, because so many people didn't have the guts to do this. I want to thank and big shout out to Maria Corina Machado. I mean, this is lady has put her life on the line for years. Maduro wanted to kill her, and she fought and fought and fought. And so now it's, we've got to bring it to a transition till we get liberty and freedom. I'm confident that Marco Rubio's got a plan. We talked about it. It's not going to be easy. There's a lot of bad people that are in power down there still. But I believe good will prevail, and we will get freedom and liberty and for the Venezuelans.
Can I just follow up on that? Does that involve the Vice President, Delcy Rodriguez? Because she obviously seemed to be on board at the press conference, what we learned from the president, but then yet yesterday she spent the afternoon on social media condemning the attack, demanding Maduro be freed.
I can't imagine that anybody that's part of the inner circle of Maduro will be in power. They had an election. Maduro's not the president of Venezuela. They had an election. Armando Gonzalez won. Maria Corina Machado would have won, but Maduro wouldn't let her on the ballot. I'm optimistic. I don't think it's going to be easy. There's been a lot of bad people. These cartels have destroyed this country. So there's a lot of bad people still around in Venezuela. It's going to take a lot of work. But I can tell you what, the Venezuelan people, they want change. They voted for change. And I think there's a lot of wonderful Venezuelans that want to go home and rebuild this great country. I was there before Chavez, and it's a beautiful place with wonderful people, and they have so much in natural resources. So I'm very optimistic that we're going to have another great ally that's got a lot of natural resources and will have a lot of success.
So this will obviously have a lot of a domino effect in the neighborhood down there. President Trump and Secretary Rubio talked about the possibilities for Cuba. Let's play this clip real quick.
Cuba is going to be something we'll end up talking about, because Cuba is a failing nation right now, very badly failing nation. And we want to help the people. It's very similar in the sense that we want to help the people in Cuba.
When the president speaks, you should take him seriously. Suffice it to say, Cuba is a disaster. It's run by incompetent, senile men. If I lived in Havana and I was in the government, I'd be concerned.
Can you imagine when Venezuela, God willing, is rebuilt? It should be a wealthy country. Venezuela should be a wealthy country with all that oil, and Cuba should be a wealthy country with the natural resources it has. These are countries that should not have 60 to 80% poverty, or 60 to 80% poverty. I think that's the poverty rate in Venezuela is not far below Cuba's. So they should not be mired in poverty. Could you imagine all the people, wonderful, morally superior liberals and Democrats and progressives who voted for Mamdani, who love socialism and think communism is just fine? Can you imagine how they'll spin Cuba, the current government falling, and a new government being rebuilt by Cuban-Americans and the U.S.? Imagine how Democrats are going to spin that. Trump, the authoritarian, bringing democracy and freedom and wealth to Venezuela and Cuba. What a despot Trump is. And there's the people who say, well, it's still regime change. No, this sending Americans to never-ending counterinsurgency conflicts and having Americans sent to fight an unknown enemy. And we saw that, like, God bless the Vietnam veterans watching. In Vietnam, we repeated the same mistakes in Iraq and Afghanistan. And President Obama in Libya helped destroy that country with an intervention that failed. And so you have military quagmires that were endless and were started by Bush, President Obama, and then Biden took office, and then Russia invaded. Practically like what, a year and a half, a year after Biden took over. All of these geopolitical nightmares under Bush, Obama, and Biden, yet Trump, oh my God, oh, and then you have like 1 million views on MSDNC or whatever. Oh, did you see that Trump talked about drug prices and prescription prices? Oh, and it's like they're missing. That's why they lost every battleground state. They're completely clueless. But let's continue.
House Armed Services Committee member Carlos Hernandez joins me now. Congressman, security forces have been patrolling in the streets of Caracas. Gunfire was reported overnight. There is repression in Venezuela. What should we do about that?
But I think the president, I'm sure, has a plan, along with our Secretary of State and Secretary of War, to transition to a democracy in Venezuela. It's easier said than done. It's going to take some time, but this has to happen in a matter of months and not a matter of years. Now we have captured some oil tankers, and we're going to bring them to U.S. shores. We're going to refine that oil, and the president has said that oil will be used for the benefit of Venezuela and the United States. So that's what we should be doing, looking towards establishing a free and democratic Venezuela.
Do you think there's a deal here? President Trump is going to get 30, 50 million barrels of oil or more. Is he saying to the leaders in Caracas, we're going to get the oil and you're not going to do anything about it? And if you do, there'll be hell to pay. Is that the deal?
Well, that oil is sanctioned by the United States. They have been using that to finance their illegitimate regime for a long time. Now we need to make sure that the profits of that oil benefit the people of Venezuela and not the regime. Now the regime is going to have to play ball with President Trump. And I am sure that part of the plan, it will be they have to be in power for a while in order not to have civil war and bloodshed in Venezuela. We want to avoid that. But the plan, I'm sure, is that to have some kind of a bridge to free and fair elections and to have a free and democratic Venezuela. Part of the first part of that would be the freeing political prisoners and also allowing the opposition to return to Venezuela with security guarantees. I mean, there is no playbook for this, but I'm pretty sure that's the path we're headed into.
You're in South Florida, which is 50, 60 miles away from Cuba. You obviously know what's going on there. How close is Cuba to collapse?
Pretty close. They can't keep the power on. They can't feed their people. They don't have any medicine. Venezuela was one of the leading sources of income. Venezuela was gifting Cuba billions of dollars in oil. They would then sell it on the market for currency. Now that's being negated. Unfortunately, Mexico's trying to make that up. So Mexico is now trying to prop up the Cuban regime. Look, Cuba's been under a communist dictatorship for over 60 years. It's time for the people of Cuba to be free too. Cuba is going to be a tougher nut, though, than Venezuela. Cuba doesn't have the natural resources that Venezuela does. Venezuela can lift itself up, fairly quickly with the resources that it has, the riches that it has. Cuba doesn't have that advantage, but it does have Cubans that live outside of Cuba that are willing to go back, reinvest in the country, in the infrastructure, and bring that country back up.
So one of the reasons, pure speculation, I have zero evidence at all, but it's been reported that there are a number of, high-ranking officials in Venezuela who had hundreds of millions of dollars, perhaps from, oil revenue that they shouldn't have attained. In some estimates, close to $1 billion or more, depending on the official. I'm assuming that President Trump's administration said, okay, we're not going to pursue charges or indictments or arrests, but we want Maduro, that is an assumption. I have no evidence on that. Okay, that could be a similar situation potentially in Cuba. Again, pure speculation here. I'm actually reading on my phone a Miami Herald article, how Venezuela's government uses rich contracts to buy loyalty of top military officers. Well, that could be one of the ways. I mean, because the arrest of Maduro happened very quickly. I mean, the lead up wasn't quick, but the arrest itself. And so that kind of arrest doesn't take place without the regime saying, okay, you can have the leader. Essentially, obviously obviously people lost their lives trying to, protect Maduro, but at the end of the day, the top military leaders, for whatever purpose, for whatever reason, perhaps because of that article here in the Miami Herald. And so, that could be the same situation also in Cuba. I don't know.
The White House is still interested in Greenland. It says it's crucial for national security. Press Secretary Carolyn Leavitt also says using the military is always an option. Congressman, will the Republican Party go along?
So we'll never take Greenland by force. That was only a purchase. And we need Greenland because it could become literally independent and join Russia theoretically. I'm not saying it's likely. I'm saying theoretically. It's, in a referendum, it's a semi-autonomous nation within the Kingdom of Denmark, which is a great ally. Love Denmark. God bless the people of Denmark and Greenland. They're amazing allies. Very important, but also, if heaven forbid, in next year or 5 years or 10 years, if Greenland becomes independent through a referendum and then decides to join Russia, who can stop them? And then what would happen? NATO or the EU would rely on the United States yet again to save Europe from another potential quagmire. But let's continue.
Trump says not in America's backyard. The Wall Street Journal reporting that the president and his team are working behind the scenes to topple Cuba's communist regime by the end of the year. Sources say the administration is actively searching for Cuban government insiders willing to help cut a deal. The White House believes the moment is now. Cuba's economy is nearing collapse. You got food and fuel shortages, rolling blackouts, a government that appears as fragile as ever. This after the U.S. arrested their biggest ally, Venezuelan dictator Nicolas Maduro. Okay, so I'm gonna go back to something I said earlier. I think the president's got a real taste for moves around the globe. Add Cuba to that list. Could be a very good thing for the world, Gary, but it is a big question mark in terms of how that plays out, how much of the president's attention it requires, and what does it mean for the American military, for example?
I lived in North Miami Beach, Florida for a very long time when I was young, and I was very good friends. My family was very good friends with Cubans that came from Cuba, was telling us stories you would not believe. And I cannot believe it's 2026 and just 90 miles south of Key West, they're still in the position that they were 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago. And it nauseates the hell out of me that you have some politicians on a certain side that have glamorized Cuba and the Castros and their health care while destroying the citizens there and destroying all hope. And it's still that way to this date. I have been waiting for somebody to do something. It's so close to do. It's a small island. Other islands have thrived with great, by the way, from what I hear, I haven't been there, great beaches and all, all these other places have thrived in the Bahamas and farther down there. It is about time something gets done for the people of Cuba. I cannot.
Democrats, the ladies at The View, and Mamdani voters are opposed to that. They don't want that to take place because they're morally superior, don't you know?
I believe we're still in that same place throughout these years. I don't understand why and I'm not an interventionist, but I don't understand why 90 miles south something has not been done.
So let me jump on that, Jay.
So that is a great point. I am not regime change military interventions, I am not a fan of. I am against those things. There is a difference, however. There is a huge difference between President Obama's intervention in Libya that exacerbated or that helped either start or exacerbate a terrible civil war. There is a difference between Bush, Cheney, and Rumsfeld going into Iraq and Afghanistan and sending Americans to face IEDs and different sectarian clashes and violence and civil war. There is a difference if a morally superior progressive or leftist or, pundit says, look at what Trump is doing in Cuba and Venezuela and Greenland. I think the world would rather have Venezuela and Cuba democratic without endless war. I'm against endless wars. I don't want an endless war like we saw in Iraq and Afghanistan. But if it can happen through oil, leverage via oil sanctions and blockades, or arresting the leader, and if it happens and Venezuela becomes a wealthier country with people, with poverty alleviated, what's wrong with that? How is that immoral or bad? It's better for the United States of America. It's better for the world. It's better for the Western Hemisphere. It's better for everybody. So Democrats, their rebuttal is, we want Cuba to remain communist. Democrats say Cuba must remain communist and Venezuela must remain either communist, socialist, or, with the current government. But President Trump is completely reshaping everything via tariffs, oil, and not sending Americans to never-ending wars. That's my point. That's my point. That's the rebuttal to anyone who makes a stupid argument. Oh, well, Trump is so militant. He's not. He's still compared to, he's not a pacifist, but compared to President Obama, Bush, and even Biden, but we didn't have, he didn't have the money, thank God, to do anything terrible. But the invasion took place under his watch in Europe. Compared to his predecessors, Trump is the anti-war president still.
Jackie, Gary makes a great point. It's on one hand, you say, how do these guys survive so long? On the other hand, they have. Okay, so when you say, you're like, how could that happen? I think to Gary's point about intervention is you probably got to do something real big if you want to dislodge the communists from Cuba.
Also, I mean, with Biden, it was Joe Biden. It was Joe Biden that had the reward. Okay, Biden raises reward. So people who say, well, look what Trump is doing in Venezuela. That was a U.S. policy. That was U.S. policy from the Biden administration, just like it was U.S. policy. Hold on, where is that? Just like it was Biden's policy to deport more people. ICE deportations under Biden, 10-year high. Who was president 10 years prior? President Obama, who also used ICE. Democrats don't know politics unless Trump is in office. Then suddenly they're interested. You never heard the word ICE from Democrats ever in Biden's administration or President Obama's administration. Not one time. So it's like, it takes 3 weeks to indoctrinate a morally superior, highly educated liberal to start keying Teslas. Like 3 weeks of prolonged media indoctrination or propaganda. But let's continue here.
That even if it's a great thing to do, doing a big thing is a big thing.
And that is why they have survived so long, because nobody else has been willing to step up to the plate and take the risk in order to do it. In your intro, Brian, as you were discussing the economic issues and the crisis that the people in Cuba are facing, and in your analysis of how long they have been living under a repressive regime, you could interchange the words Cuba and Iran to a certain extent, and both situations are very, very similar. In one case, you're dealing with communism. In the other case, you're dealing with militant religious oppression. But these are two situations that I think the president is closely watching right now. After he took care of Venezuela, after he went to Davos and handled his Greenland situation, created his board of peace, these are the next two things on the agenda. And yes, unfortunately, in both situations, you've got to do something very, very big. But he's demonstrated that we have the military force and the smart defensive strategies to be able to do that. The question.
So I don't think it'll be military force. The Venezuelan oil not being sent to Cuba will be enough. See, that's the thing. Bush and President Obama, they actually did engage in endless wars. President Trump uses oil as like the greatest weapon possible.
Back with more of our one-on-one interview with Secretary of State Marco Rubio. And while he represents our nation on the world stage, the secretary remains devoted to his faith and his family. So we asked about how he's balancing it all and what it was like going from a Trump opponent to the Trump cabinet. Well, I want to talk about you. You are the son of parents who came here from Cuba to pursue the American dream.
Yeah.
Do you think they would have ever imagined having a son who was first a United States Senator and now Secretary of State? That is really the American dream.
You know, and I don't know how many kids grow up to say, I want to be a senator and a Secretary of State either, you know. I don't know if they would have imagined it. I do think my parents really believed and instilled, you know, my parents didn't leave me any money or connections or anything like that. But the one thing I did inherit from my parents was this unyielding belief that we weren't limited because of who they were. In essence, my parents never made us feel like because he was a bartender and she was a maid and they came from Cuba, that there are things I couldn't do. There are things their kids couldn't do. I never felt that growing up. On the contrary, they instilled in us that basically you can be anything you want. If you have the ability to do it, you'll have a real chance to do it because you're in the one place on earth where that's possible. So that's the greatest gift my parents left me. And I think it speaks more broadly to what America's always been about. And I mean, it's not just me. I mean, if you look across our government, if you look across our business class, if you look across, very little of the top leaders in American business inherited the companies they now run. Many of these are people that came from, you know, different backgrounds that achieved extraordinary things. And that's what we always want to continue to be as a country. So yeah, it's a testament to my parents, but I really think it's a testament to America.
And as he leads the way for America on the world stage, Secretary Rubio's staying true to those core values. I know that your faith, Secretary, has always been a big part of your life. So how has that come into play to help you in your new role here?
That's a great question. I think you rely on your faith more than anything else to ground you, like to remind you that at the end of the day, everything you do is transitory, and that it also reminds you that as big as government is or as important as politics is, in many cases, there's something more important, you know. I think it also reminds you too of like the most important jobs you have. I've always said it, I don't care what job you have. The most important job I'm ever gonna have is my role as a husband and as a father, and that comes from my faith as well.
Your family is also, I know, such a big part of your life. And you and I talked once upon a time, and I know famously when you were in the Senate, you didn't miss games, you didn't miss any of the important things in.
I tried not to. Sometimes I did, I know.
But how is it working now? Because this is a big job.
It's a little harder. My kids are a little older now, so I think they have more, you know, going on in their own lives that doesn't involve us as much in terms of like being there. But I still try not to miss things. The rule always was, if it's something that's never going to happen again, I want to be there. I think we did a pretty good job on that.
Seems like it so far.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to go have some coffee. Let's go.
This is your shot of Cuban coffee?
So this is it. Okay.
Well, you've had this before.
Yeah. What do I need to know? How do we drink it? Sip?
I drink it like, try this in 2 sips.
Okay, let's see. Oh, in 2 sips. I got to catch up. Hold on.
Yeah. Well, the thing about this is, like, what I love about Cuban coffee is that if you buy it from a coffee stand in Miami, it's like $1. If you buy an espresso from Starbucks or one of these other places, it's like $4.
Yeah, I know.
So
this is the way to go. This is the way to go. We're looking out over the U.S. Capitol building there, and you were there for 14 years as a senator.
Yeah.
So does it feel surreal to be here now, looking out at over, you know, what used to be your old job?
Well, you know, we've been so busy the last 6 months that I've had time to sort of sit back and sort of appreciate that. But I will tell you that a lot of what I learned working in that building, which is a very different job from this one, has been very useful to me here. and in understanding and appreciating the role Congress plays. But now I'm in the executive branch, right? So I think being there prepared me for this. I didn't know I was going to be here. And I have great, we did a lot of really good things while I was over there that I'm very proud of. But yeah, I haven't had time to sort of take that in. We've been really busy though.
So Rubio is going to be J.D. Vance's vice president. You heard it here. You know what? There's not. I'm so thankful for everybody that's on this live stream. We do 1,000 viewers all the time, and views are down on YouTube for a lot of channels, and so things will pick up because President Trump's administration is going to start indicting a whole bunch of people, and they're in jurisdictions of the country that, you're not going to always get a favorable magistrate or judge, and a lot of other things are taking place that specifically my viewers enjoy. But you heard it here. This isn't, a gigantic live stream at the moment, but Marco Rubio is going to be J.D. Vance's vice president. That J.D. Vance will be the nominee. There's zero chance that J.D. Vance and Marco Rubio, unless something, God forbid, cataclysmic takes place, there's practically zero chance they lose in 28. I have called pretty much every election. I said that Clinton would lose to Trump. By that, the Biden one was an interesting one. We'll leave that alone. And then I said President Trump's going to come back and win in 24. Indicted doesn't even matter. You can watch the segment on this channel for new viewers when they first hit the channel. And so he'll win Supreme Court victories. Supreme Court sides with President Trump over 90% of the time. But Marco Rubio is doing a great job. He's doing a fantastic job, really. And Vance and Rubio, they don't have what President Trump has in terms of this unique, grandiose charisma, but they have charisma, and they have something also that maybe even President Trump doesn't have, and he doesn't need it. But they can speak the media's language. President Trump is like a one-man media machine taking on monstrosity, public relations monstrosity, that going up against him for 10 years globally. Every major publication, 24/7, negative media coverage. But they're very articulate, very intelligent. They can go ahead and express themselves very well. And yeah, I mean, thank you, JP. Thank you. They're not going to, there's no candidate. So if it's Vance versus Newsom, for example, or Vance versus anybody the Democrats decide, Vance is very good, articulate, very intelligent, very good at expressing all the victories of President Trump's administration. Okay, and there are many. The tariffs are bringing home manufacturing jobs, or let's put it this way: they're starting the ball rolling on addressing the scourge of outsourcing. So when Democrats say, "Oh, manufacturing jobs haven't come back," it's like, yeah, it takes. We've had 4 years of Biden with a terrible economy, prices up 23%, outsourcing, hurting communities around the country. So Trump is literally doing what Democrats like, as always, with the reward. They claim they want to do something, they don't do it. They ran against outsourcing, and President Trump is doing things via tariffs to ensure that supply chains are being brought back to the U.S. And he's also addressing issues on the world stage. And Marco Rubio, Secretary of State, a big part of it.
The last 6 months.
We like you busy. That's good stuff. So we want you to keep it up.
We will.
Certainly keeping busy alongside President Trump. You'd almost forget they were once staunch opponents.
Tell me about going from sparring with President Trump on a debate stage to now working alongside him every single day.
You know, I'm a big fan of martial art, particularly like MMA, but boxing and stuff like that. And I always chuckle in politics because if two people, you know, when two guys get in the ring, they could like each other. And you see after every fight, they shake hands, they appreciate the combat. You know, you respect someone who's willing to step into that octagon, right? because very few people in the world are willing to actually step in there and do that. But no one's ever asked these fighters, why did you punch that guy in the face in the second round? I mean, no one would ask that. It was a stupid question, right? So in 2016, both President Trump and I didn't know him. I'd never met him before. I knew who he was, obviously, but I'd never met him. And we happened to be competing for the same thing. So in any competition, especially as you get down and it narrows down to 3 or 4 people, punches are going to be thrown. But then that ends. And then we're on the same team because he's a Republican nominee and I'm a Republican. I was in the Senate during the 4 years, his first term, and it was the best 4 years I had in the Senate. We got a lot done together. And then obviously he's a resident of Florida, so he was my constituent, and we stayed in touch during that time. And then I was very happy to be helpful on the campaign. He picked one of my closest friends in politics, J.D. Vance, to be vice president. It was a great team. And then we were on the same team from that point forward and have been ever since.
And this man is going to be vice president. Okay, can you look at the difference between the Democrats and the Republicans today? Tim Walz, okay, was the Democratic Party's vice president pick in 24. Tim Walz. You go from Tim Walz to Marco Rubio, or Tim Walz, J.D. Vance now. But imagine you have Tim Walz as VP, Marco Rubio will be VP for J.D. Vance. I mean, it's like you go from a tricycle to a Lamborghini. It's unbelievable, and it's just, I mean,
How is he to work with day to day?
It's a lot of fun.
Yeah,
it is fun, and I mean, it's fun for 2 reasons. The first is he's a person of action, and I don't mean that in a reckless way, but in a let's get this thing done. And it isn't like let's wait 6 months to do it. It's more like on a 6 to 8 hour, time constraint. So I think the chance for someone like me that's been around this for a little bit, coming from the Senate where it took forever just to get a bill passed, to be in a place and in a position where things that you've wanted to do, reorganizing the State Department, getting engaged in different parts of the world and doing some of the things we've done, to actually be able to execute and do and have the backing of a president to do things and get things done is incredibly rewarding. There is no point in being in this business, in this line of work, if you can't get things done. So that makes it a lot of fun. And then I think the other part that most people don't see, and frankly, I had not seen as much until the last couple of years being around him, he's a lot of fun to be around as a person. I mean, and he has extraordinary, in my view, uncanny instincts. And I've seen that play out time and time again. And I think that's a very underappreciated part of his leadership skill set. He is.
So whenever they say, oh, Biden was a good man and Trump is so vile, what Democrats are really saying, or, a lot of Democrats, or whatever, people who don't like Trump, what they're really saying is, he took political power, we don't like him. And we're not going to humanize Donald Trump. We're not going to see him as a human being. We're going to make absurd, outlandish claims. What are the most absurd claims? Oh, he went bankrupt. So what? He has hundreds upon hundreds of businesses. And so you go bankrupt. So people go bankrupt all the time. They rebuild themselves. That's actually something that is noteworthy or admirable. He's a billionaire, 2-time president. Put that on your resume for a job application. Okay, I don't care if you're a billionaire. Are you a 2-time president? If you're a billionaire watching this, are you a 2-time president? No. And so the people who disparage Trump, he had a casino, or he did this or that, and he was bankrupt. But he has billions of dollars, and he won the presidency twice. The last time he won, it was a landslide, modern day landslide. He won every battleground state, and he won the popular vote with Jimmy Kimmel every single day and night going after him, and the ladies at The View and CNN and MSNBC and The Guardian, the BBC, all going editing things, and then they're all paying him $15 million in defamation suits now, and so he is the only one of the few people in world history who could have taken on media around the world. Not many people could have done that. All of Hollywood going after Trump, they all have media executives, public relations executives, carefully crafting their image. Okay, and still people don't go to the theater like they did. Still, Hollywood's losing money. But President Trump had 90+% negative media coverage. He still won. And so you just heard from Marco Rubio that, yeah, he's great to be around. Trump has a great personality. According to people who know him, they love him. His family loves him. I mean, it's like, so people are like, oh, Trump is so vile. It's like, you know what? The main reason people don't like Trump, they don't like his personality, is because he took political power away from them. That's the main reason. If Trump was a liberal Democrat, oh my God, they would love his personality.
Incredible instincts for human behavior, human nature, and it translates to politics and global events.
Final question. You just brought up your run in 2016 for president. You are talked about quite frequently as a possible contender in 2028. Do you have your sights set outside of the State Department?
Well, I think J.D. Vance would be a great nominee, and if I think if he decides he wants to do that, and so I think he's doing a great job as vice president.
So there you go. You just heard from Marco Rubio that he's going to be the vice president, or he wants to be the vice president. I mean, there you go. You just heard it, ladies and gentlemen. I mean, you just heard it here. This should be breaking news. He's going to be, and again, if Cuba gets rebuilt after the government becomes a different government, and God willing, it's like, God bless the Cuban people, God bless the Venezuelan people. I don't want bloodshed. I don't want any terrible calamity. But this is a different ballgame than what Bush and Cheney and Rumsfeld and President Obama did. Very different ballgame. And anyone trying to say it's the same thing, well, it's not. But can you imagine Marco Rubio as vice president visiting Cuba when it's being rebuilt by Cuban-Americans? What a beautiful thing. And still Democrats would be against it. And still, they'll find some way. You'll get all the ladies at The View. I don't think that, well, I liked the old communist regime. Oh, thanks, ladies at The View.
He's a close friend, and I hope he intends to do it. I know it's kind of early, but being in the role that I'm in here at the Secretary of State, I really don't play in politics. There's actually rules against me being involved in domestic politics, and I want to do this job as long as the president allows me to do it, and stay in that job, which would keep me here all the way through, January of 2028. I feel, honestly, you never know what the future holds. You never rule things out or anything like that, because you just don't know. Things change very quickly. But that said, I believe that if I am able to be here, through the duration of this presidency, and we get things done at the pace that we've been doing the last 6 months, I'll be able to look back at my time in public service and say, I made a difference, I had an impact, and I served my country in a very positive way.
So, yeah, he's done a great job. This is happening, ladies and gentlemen. He's completely reshaping the map of the world, President Trump is. He's completely reshaping the map of the world. And you can look at Wall Street Journal exclusive. The U.S. is actively seeking regime change in Cuba. But again, not a counterinsurgency conflict. Okay, you're not going to have American soldiers patrolling the streets of Havana. Very different from what Bush and Cheney and Rumsfeld and Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden voted for. Very different. Politico, 8 hours ago, Trump administration weighs naval blockade to halt Cuban oil imports. Okay, this would never have happened. This would never, ever have happened with Biden or Harris. The Biden administration, Democrats have zero vision of foreign policy. They have zero foreign policy vision. We don't know what they want in terms of foreign policy, aside from just being opposed to Trump. What does the Democratic Party want domestically, aside from being opposed to Trump? Because deportations hit a 10-year high under Biden with ICE. Deportations by ICE jumped to a 10-year high. So what is it exactly the Democrats want? What's their vision, other than simply opposing Trump and pretending that the same things they're opposing didn't happen under their watch? Oh, Democrats are upset with what took place in Venezuela. Well, then why did Biden have a $25 million reward? It literally says Biden raises bounty. Why did he do that? I mean, you can look at that. You can look at ICE under Biden. What do Democrats, what is it that they actually stand for? ensuring that people live in poverty. 90% of the Cuban population lives in extreme poverty. Nitty Kitty, thank you. Paul, thank you so very, very much as always. Everybody, thank you for watching. And then you have right down here, Mexico stopping oil shipments to Cuba amid concerns. So again, this is slowly but surely taking place, and it's taking place through tariffs. It's taking place without counterinsurgency wars. That's the thing I don't think people really understand. I don't think people truly understand. And so I'm going to be doing, ladies and gentlemen, a lot more uploads on this channel. I was thinking only doing live streams, and I'm like, you know what? I'm going to try to do 3 uploads a day on the channel and then a live stream in the evening. And if the power goes out tomorrow or the next day, that's because of the potential ice storms. But I'm going to try to go ahead and do 3 videos, 3 uploads, and then 1 live stream in the evening. And then on H.A. Goodman's other channel, go there now for the upload synopsis of this live stream. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. God bless you all. See you tomorrow, everybody. Thank you. Stay safe. Stay safe with the weather. Drive safe. And don't go out. Don't drive if it's icy.